According to Sigmund Freud and the psychodynamic perspective on personality, your personality is composed of three different parts. You want to know what these parts are, as well as be familiar with their general characteristics and how to distinguish between them. So Freud and other psychoanalysts believe that the very earliest part of your personality is called the id. The id is very primitive, and it runs off of something called the pleasure principle. The pleasure principle says, if it feels good, do it. That's it. That's as highly evolved as your id will be for a psychoanalyst. So the id represents that part of your personality that does things it wants to do and doesn't do things it doesn't want to do. Very simplistic, very pleasure-seeking. The superego, on the other hand, represents your conscience. The superego is what makes you feel guilty when you feel like you've made a mistake, and what makes you feel proud when you feel like you've done something well. The superego, according to the psychodynamic perspective, is kind of the voice of society. It's the voice of what's right and wrong. And in large part, we get that from our parents, from our communities, from society. The third part in the psychodynamic perspective on personality is your ego. This is the mostly conscious part of your personality that has to juggle the influence of the id and the superego. The ego runs off of something called the reality principle. And the motto of the reality principle is, if it feels good, do it, unless there's going to be some negative consequence. So the ego is the conscious decision you make from these two opposing forces. The id says, if it feels good, do it. Superego says, good is good, bad is bad. And your ego has to figure out what to do with those two competing forces. I always use the analogy that I see in a lot of media. I've seen it on Family Guy. I've seen it on old 80s sitcoms like Full House. That's the example I'll use for you. But usually a character is trying to make a decision about what to do. And in an old episode of a show called Full House, the little girl Michelle was trying to figure out if she should eat a cookie before dinner. She'd been strictly told by her Uncle Jesse that she should not eat the cookie. So as she's thinking about what she wants to do, a little devil version of her pops up on her shoulder and says, what's the problem? You like cookies, there's a cookie, eat the cookie, right? So the devil represents the id. The id operates on that pleasure principle. She likes cookies, there's a cookie, I don't see a problem. If it feels good, I want to do it. Well, all of a sudden on the other shoulder pops up an angelic version of Michelle, and this would represent your superego, because angelic Michelle says, no, no, Michelle, we should listen to our parents. Not listening to your parents is bad, and you don't want to be bad. So Michelle is thinking she's got the id on one shoulder telling her to just eat the cookie, who cares, and the superego saying, no, no, you want to be a good person. Good people don't do what you're about ready to do. And then her ego, her conscious decision, has to figure out what to do. I think in that example she actually indeed ate the cookie, but of course in true 80s TV sitcom fashion she learned a valuable lesson with really cheesy music playing in the background. But a psychodynamic perspective would say that that's how our personalities are composed, of this id, ego, and superego. So make sure you know their general characteristics and work a lot with those practice questions so you can tell the difference between all three of those parts.